Hey guys, what's up? And welcome back to the Mamba's Legacy podcast. It's Cam, and today I'm joined here by a very special guest, Jake Fisher, writer for the Bleacher Report and author of Built to Lose: How the NBA's Tanking Era Changed the League Forever. I'd like to thank you so much for joining us here today, Jake.
Thank you for having me. This will be fun.
For sure. So, before we get started and dive into everything about your book in the tanking era, could you please just get us started with telling us a bit about yourself and how you got started in sports journalism?
Yeah, I played basketball pretty competitively. Some people will disagree with you, throughout high school, but at a certain point, kind of realized that it wasn't going to be something I made a career out of. And, instead of trying to explore that, I knew I always wanted to be around basketball and be around the game. And I had a really great writing teacher in elementary school and a phenomenal journalism advisor in high school that kind of set me on this path of being a reporter and a journalist, and one who does long form and all that type of stuff. So I feel like I've got a pretty well-rounded background from the jump compared to where other kids got to start, and from there, like, this was always what I wanted to do. So I had that North Star, that guiding light, if you will. I interned at Slam Magazine after my freshman year of college, went to the Boston Globe from there, and interned at Sports Illustrated, and stuck around at SI for over 4 years, until I got laid off in 2019 when the company got taken over by a new overlord, if you will. And from there, I had my book already in the works, fortunately and thankfully. And with some relationships, Bleacher Report has come around at the perfect time. So I really couldn't be more grateful for the path I've had so far.
That really sounds like quite the journey. So I think with that, I'm ready to just start talking about the main topic of your book, the tanking era. And I think, can you please set the scene for us a little bit about what your book's about? I know you credit the start of the tanking era in your book to like the season surrounding the 2013 NBA draft. Can you just take us back to that time in the NBA and just kind of your book's background?
Yeah, the thing with the NBA, I think people have to generally come to realize, is that the league has far developed beyond just basketball. It's a business, and it's an ecosystem and a marketplace. And the way to win a championship now isn't just to have the best player and find pieces that are complementary to him. It's about compiling multiple all-stars at the same time, and um, like, the league has hired smarter thinkers in their front offices and whatnot. Like, it used to be that every team was just run by a former player. That's not to say former players aren't smart in their own right. Like, Danny Ainge has been one of the best GMs probably in league history, but it opened the door for guys like Daryl Morey to come out of Danny Ainge's front office and use analytics and forward thinking strategies and data models to try to build out the best rosters possible. And from that, from Daryl's success in Houston and Sam Presti's success in Oklahoma City being poached from the San Antonio Spurs, it opened the door for a lot of these young analytical-minded executives, not just Sam Hinkie in Philadelphia, but Rob Hennigan in Orlando, coming from Sam Presti in OKC, Ryan McDonough coming from Boston to take over Phoenix. David Griffin came to power in Cleveland at that time. Pete D'Alessandro was a former lawyer who took over the Sacramento Kings. All these executives were coming to power in 2013 ahead of the 2014 draft class, which was to be the best class since 2003, which of course had LeBron, Wade, Bosh, Carmelo. And, at the time, Andrew Wiggins was considered to be the next LeBron, and Jabari was considered to be the next Carmelo, and Joel Embiid was the next Hakeem. And now, only one of those guys has made his when a draft has that much tantalizing talent at it. Like, these executives were all lining up to do so, to lose games on purpose, to get a shot at getting those guys, because, like we talked about, getting those guys is your ultimate key to competing for a title. So that's kind of the backdrop as to why I wanted to come up with this story and bring it to the world.
That sounds really interesting and some really good insight about that time in the league. So let's talk a bit about the 76ers in that time. And with Hinkie being one of the first executives to be so public about the idea of tanking, how do you think he really changed the path for those to come after him in regards to like being public about tanking and that being an ultimate goal at the end of the day?
Yeah, I think what Sam did differently than everybody else was that he was bold and brazen and unapologetic about it. Versus, the other teams at that time, Boston, Orlando, they came from different starting points. They had veterans like Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett or Dwight Howard to kind of reignite. Same with Steve Nash and Phoenix. Like, it's a traditional rebuild. You trade away your superstar and you move on. Philly just bottomed out before they even really got there, and they had no qualms about doing it for a couple of years. And I think in that regard, having the longest view in the room was a common Hinkie quote and mindset. Like, I think that was something that the league hadn't really seen before, especially from a big market situation like Philadelphia, which is considered, to be one of the top 5 biggest media markets in the country.
For sure, for sure. And I think that that's something that it's really special to look back on in its place and the effect on tanking. So, what would you say that the addition of the draft lottery did to tanking? Because I know it was made to combat this idea of tanking and all that. But what do you think it really did? Because in the long run, we still see tanking even in this past season by the Houston Rockets, my favorite team personally. So, what is your opinion on the lottery?
For sure. The lottery, for those who don't know, it's definitely discussed in my book, came into play because the first year David Stern took over as commissioner in the league, 1984, those Houston Rockets, your Rockets, they lost 16 of their last 21 games because there was a guy named Hakeem Olajuwon playing at the local school, and they wanted their chance of getting him. So I think I think right away David Stern initially instituted the lottery. That was the the infamous 1985 uh, frozen envelope situation. Patrick Ewing and the Knicks, because before 1985, the Rockets, all they had to do was beforehand. It was a coin flip. It was a coin flip between the worst team in the East and the worst team in the West. So that's a pretty easy situation, for a team compared to now, where you spin it forward. The lottery reform that got passed in 2017 as a result from Sam Hinkie, and that period, now the bottom 3 teams have an even 14% chance. So it's been a long way from that coin toss to this format now, and there's been different iterations, and there's been different. It's pretty much been based on ping pong balls since 1993. But from there, I think the way it currently stands, like, your Rockets are another example where they didn't think they were going to lose James Harden. They went in, they were actively turning down trade offers for PJ Tucker and other players at that time, thinking that they were trying to keep James in town and build a contender around him. And that didn't end up being the case. And the Orlando Magic, they set off with playoff interest and hopes and desires before that last season, and ultimately got some injuries and realized they weren't that good. They traded Nick Vucevic and Aaron Gordon and Evan Fournier at the trade deadline, and they're right in the tanking picture too. But we still see OKC and Detroit, like, teams that are in small markets, even with the lottery reform where it's been. The small market's best option to getting one of these all-star guys is through the draft. And if you get him at 19 years old, you get him through his youth and his prime and the start of his prime, and hopefully you can have him on, a full 9-year team control, because rookie contracts are 4 years long, and you can sign them now to a 5th-year supermax if they're worth it. So I think that's why the strategy is still existing, but it's not necessarily as strong now, being that the odds are what they are. The play-in tournament has allowed more teams to kind of keep an eye towards the postseason, and there are just more teams trying to win now, I think, than we have seen in the last couple of years. But I think that might be a product of all the tanking we saw in the last half decade.
Right. And I feel like for teams located in places like LA or New York, just to name the biggest two, they sometimes have it easy. But when you see the way that like the Bucks were able to grow into who the team that they are, and even in a small market setting, I think it's quite remarkable. And I feel like with those teams, they kind of gain the respect of the general fan base of the whole NBA a lot easier than teams who just sign a bunch of free agents. So I think it can really be fun for the fans of those teams in small markets. And I know as a Rockets fan, I'm definitely looking forward to what's to come for us, the way we've done this with tanking. So with
Yeah,
that,
I'm sure
I
it's going to
know,
be, not
oh,
to
go
interrupt
ahead.
you, but like I'm sure it's going to be a fun year for you, right? Like there's no expectations. You get to see these young guys play and run around and have fun. Like I'm sure it's going to be a fun time.
Yes, it definitely will be. But I know leading up to this year that there was a definite divide when it comes to tanking. So with your studies on tanking, what do you think about the divide amongst maybe multiple people a part of the same organization in the
Yeah.
NBA, or even the fans, like the divide that tanking may cause? Is it good? Is it bad? What do you think about that?
Well, the divide is certainly bad. I think time and time again in the NBA, franchises that aren't successful on the court, typically that stems from where you just you see infighting or a lack of harmony within the organization off the court. And I think that's where we see executives end up getting fired and coaches losing their jobs, where it's ownership no longer being on board with the plan that they were sold. This like the Orlando Magic before they trade Vucevic, Evan Fournier, and Aaron Gordon. Like I promise you, they got to get ownership approval. Same with James Harden and the Rockets, right? And when you're getting ownership approval, you're telling them, here's what's going to happen. Here, we're going to be bad for a couple of years. We're going to get these guys, but then we're going to be right back in the playoff picture with these two young stars and blah, blah, blah. So I think, some people view it as an affront on the game and on the league, but I will say, as long as the players and the coaches aren't trying to lose games, what do you really have against it? I don't even really care if players and coaches do try to lose games, because at the end of the day, this is a business and it's a long, long con. It's not just you don't just put together a team and win a title. It takes years of strategy and planning and growth and coaching. So to do that, like if this is the best option for a lot of teams, which it is, like we're not going to see Kyle Lowry go sign with the Oklahoma City Thunder. He left Toronto for Miami. Like Lonzo Ball leaves New Orleans for Chicago. I mean, New Orleans doesn't want to keep him, but DeMar DeRozan goes to Chicago. Like KD and Kyrie went to Brooklyn. LeBron and AD are in LA. Russell Westbrook is in LA now. You know what I mean? So I think it's just we got to call a spade a spade. And if you want these teams to be good, the best way to be good is to get multiple all-stars. And the best way to get multiple all-stars, if you're not in a glamour market, is to tank and build through the draft.
Yeah, I think that as people in the moment of tanking, it definitely isn't a fun thing to necessarily be a part of or a fun thing to watch. But I think people become a lot more accepting of it now that we've seen so many people do such remarkable things after the tanks, that post tanking era has really been a way for people to see the light at the end of the tunnel, if you know what I'm saying there.
I think so. I mean, anyone I've talked to with Philly during those years, the Celtics guys, teams that have had success after it, they all look back on those years fondly. Just a young group trying to get better and work hard every day. When you're in a situation where there's pressure to win, like a lot of guys end up not liking each other. Like when there's pressure to win, sure, that's what you ultimately want to be playing for, but it could be a tough situation. People want to get paid. They want to have their agenda take precedent over yours. So I think when everyone's just in it together and in a situation where winning night to night isn't necessarily important, it can actually be, kind of something that is enjoyed upon.
Yeah, there is an enjoyable part to it. And I think that part is definitely just the development and getting to see the group kind of grow together. And I think that that's really remarkable that it's even in losing situations, these athletes still are able to grow bonds together. And I'm sure it's much more difficult, but they'll be more appreciative of it in the end. So I'd like to ask you, how do you think if you're maybe a new coach or a young athlete and you have something to prove in the league, how do you think that you really make the most of your development during these times when it's just so hard to win? What do you think that these athletes or coaches do to just stand out and not get all the hate for what's going on, if you can understand what I'm saying there?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take it to Boston. Like Brad Stevens, he was not a tanker. He wanted to win every single game. He was using every game. He was a rookie head coach in 2013, 14 when that team started, when that tank job started. So he was just trying to grow every day too. And I think in Brett Brown in Philadelphia, like he told every single player there, like I'm here to help make you better. I'm here to help you make you money. And it was his first time coaching too. Like I think you like the people inside of it, they just like they lock into the craft and the journey and the process and like try to just lose themselves in that.
Yeah, I think that it's definitely there's ways to prove yourself in all situations. And speaking of a process, could you just share with us your personal process? What did you have to go through to just make the book that you have published for us today? Like, what was the process that went through your head when developing these ideas that you're sharing with us today in this interview?
Yeah, I think I was at Sports Illustrated for a long while and was looking for something, the next like project or opportunity to sink my teeth into. And at a certain point, I realized like I can kind of make that opportunity happen. I can work on this book. And the reason I wanted to was because I'm from Philly originally. I was covering that Sixers team, but then I was in school in Boston. And after I interned at Slam, I was going to TD Garden every night with a Slam credential, and it just felt like I was in the eye of the tanking hurricane, if you will. And from there, like I've always been a draft guy. I was covering the draft starting in 2013, that Slam internship, reaching out to agents and players and writing profiles and stuff. And the draft is a very heavy central theme to the book. So from there, I just kind of felt like this was a topic for me. It couldn't really just be a Sixers book. It had to cover other things too. And from there, I just spent 2 years making calls and going to games and shoot arounds and talking to players, and getting people on the phone through their agents and PR people and whatnot. And at a certain point, I talked to over 300 people, and you've been doing this long enough. When you're talking to people, you already start to see the. I'll say all the time, like when someone tells me a little story, okay, that's like a paragraph detail I can put in. I can see that. I can see that paragraph in my head as the person's even saying it sometimes. So to me, I've always been like an outline guy. So once I was able to transcribe all the material, I just kind of start. You need that first scene that's going to bring people in, and once I figured out what it was, I brought people right to Nerlens Noel's draft table at that 2013 draft, where he's supposed to be the number one pick, and John Calipari is this boisterous, head coach from Kentucky who's there with him, thinking it's another opportunity on TV to show to future recruits that he's got a number one pick. And Nerlens starts falling from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6, where Sam Hinkie comes in and takes him. It just seemed like a great place to start it. So you just try to juice in as much detail as you can. I mean, I think that's what a nonfiction book and nonfiction storytelling in general is about. It's about bringing new information that people can't find anywhere else in a storytelling format. So it just kind of outline the ideas you want to get to, the bigger ideas and the bigger scenes, and try to pack in little supplementary supporting details like you can as you write through it, and hopefully it makes sense to someone else when you show it to them.
Yeah, that seems really interesting. And it's kind of cool to imagine how you're talking to all these individuals and these paragraphs are just forming in your head. That really sticks out to me. Just how the book starts from the moment you start speaking to these people, how it all starts coming together for you. So you said that you spoke to over 300 individuals, and I know that's a lot of people, but who are the people who really stuck out to you of those few when you got to interview them? Were there any that really were like, wow, this is a really cool moment getting to hear their perspective on tanking or just whatever you were interviewing about for that part of your book?
Yeah, I think Thaddeus Young was someone who I was really excited to talk to, being that I just I lived the majority of his career as a Sixers fan, but up close and personal. I was very lucky that my father had season tickets, and and that like I literally sat a row behind Thad Young's wife during Sixers games growing up. So like to sit down with him as a professional all those years later and like go down memory lane through things we kind of lived together, like Hedo Turkoglu's game-winning buzzer beater in a first-round playoff series one year against the Magic, and other details from the book. Like it was cool to catch up with someone who I felt was like an old friend, even though I never met the guy before. So that was an experience I'll definitely remember and think about. But in terms of like someone whose perspective was super interesting to learn, um, I'll say I talked to Evan Turner for the book a lot too, another former Sixer. But then I think his time also in Boston was really interesting to me. I mean, he left Philly and got traded to Indiana and kind of like fell out of the league when he was traded there to kind of be like this missing piece, sixth, seventh man that was going to help the Pacers beat the Miami Heat in the Eastern Conference Finals in 2014. And then he just like didn't play at all really in the Eastern Conference Finals, and he got depressed and really thought about walking away from basketball altogether. But then through Brad Stevens, he has this opportunity in Boston to come there on a minimum deal, and then he ends up becoming a veteran leader there for those young guys and leaving Boston to sign a 4-year, like $74 million deal for Portland. Like that was a pretty cool path. So to reflect on him with that was interesting too.
That definitely does sound interesting. So before I let you go here, Jake, just if you could close us out with all these pieces of your book all came together and you're a published author, and all these pieces and memories and all this insight is part of your opportunity to get to record this time period in sports history. How special is that to you?
I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty cool. Like I'm definitely grateful for it, and like happy to talk about it with you guys because like I not to big time you here, but like obviously you guys are starting out, and like I was there, I get it. So when I got back my manuscript and read it over a second time and then a third time, from the publisher, and got to that last scene, Brett Brown is like making a joke at a press conference about who would ever tank, and his hair is grayed like a president's before and after photo. Like that scene kind of got me a little emotional reading it back, and like because it was a good book, and I was definitely pretty proud of myself. So all that being said, I definitely poured my heart, gut, blood, sweat, and tears into that. So anyone who listening who hasn't got a copy yet, would greatly appreciate it if you did so. It's available on Amazon, bookshop.org if you want to support a local bookseller, Barnes& and Noble. I publish for Triumph Books. I'm pretty sure my publisher for Triumph Books, there's a promo code Fisher30 in all caps, my last name, FISCHER. It has a promo code there, I think for 30% off. So that is my spiel. And yeah, to wrap it up, like to be able to say all that and to make that spiel, it's pretty cool. And I hope the more people that support this one, the greater chance it is to be able to do another one.
Definitely. And thank you so much for coming on. As you said, we're getting started here and doing this, and it really means a lot to have someone like you come on to talk to us and our listeners. I really appreciate that. And guys, make sure you guys go purchase his book. It's How the NBA's Tanking Era Changed the League Forever, and you can get it at all
Built
those
to lose.
places that he
Built
mentioned.
to lose is the title. How the
Built to
NBA tanking era changed the league forever is the subtitle.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'd like to thank you so much, Jake, for coming on today. And I hope you have a great day and best of luck.
Yeah, thank you, Cam. Same to you guys.
Bye bye.